Hello everybody, I'm Tim Blair. This is the Clay County Times-Democrat weekly web update for the week of March 19th, 2014. Our weekly web updates are brought to you here on cctimesdemocrat.com by the good folks at Piggott State Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender, and serving this region since back in 1930. Well, we come to you the first full day of spring for 2014. The equinox around just before noon yesterday brought in spring and somewhat more spring-like weathers, even though temperatures have been still getting down in the 30s, and we have forecast of temperatures back into perhaps the mid-20s next week. We have some more seasonal conditions have come upon us, and temperatures today, though it's rather breezy here on Friday, are fairly warm. Temperature expected to reach up around 69 degrees. Well, this week here on the weekly web update, let's talk a little bit about what's in this week's print edition of the Clay County Times-Democrat and why we're standing where we are, which is near Pollard, Arkansas, in front of a chicken house, at least formerly a chicken house, built for that purpose back many years ago in the poultry boom that came to Clay County back in the mid to late 40s after World War II, which peaked in the 80s pretty much and then died out in the 90s. And this is one of the many chicken houses. You can see there are others down behind me here that were part of the Rogers Produce empire, poultry empire if you would, of chicken houses, a processing plant, and also a fleet of trucks which serviced the region from 1949 to 1993. Now we bring that up for a couple of reasons, one being that in this week's edition of the Clay County Times-Democrat you can read all the information on the Quorum Court taking the next steps toward Pico Foods, bringing some 600 plus chicken houses primarily to western Clay County, and also the feed mill to Corning, the processing plant is coming to Pocahontas, but the Quorum Court dealing with that at their most recent meeting, and we've got details on that. We'll talk more about the chicken houses coming up in just a bit. We'd also like to let you know in this week's edition of the paper we've got all the information on an event coming up in downtown Piggott the first few days of April, coming up for the first weekend of April and the days leading up to that. Some activities to mark the anniversary of the dedication of the bandstand down there. That's in this week's paper as well. Also the information on the Rector FFA auction, and of course that would include also the Little Mr. and Miss RHS and so forth going on down in Rector. We've got all the details in this week's paper. Also about the fire that destroyed Hunter's Cafe over here in Pollard last week. We have information in the paper. We shared some video of that with you on last week's webcast. We also have information in this week's paper on David Gregory being named to the Piggott Healthcare Facilities Board. And we also have a story about some of the Clay County co-op linemen who are going off to Guatemala to work. That's all in this week's edition of the Clay County Times-Democrat. Also have information on the two All-State Cougars, our All-Conference Cougars and Mohawks, update on softball and baseball, all in this week's edition as well. We encourage you to pick up a copy of that. And speaking of softball, we did get out yesterday afternoon, on Thursday afternoon, the Lady Mohawks sweeping Hoxie in a doubleheader here. Wasn't even close either game as the Mohawks powered past the Lady Mustangs, and we were there with our camera. Let's share that for you now. And again, the Mohawks will be in action, or scheduled to be in action today. We'll have all the information on the Mohawks, Lady Mohawks, Cougars, and Lady Cougars in the next edition of the Clay County Times-Democrat print and online editions. We'd also like to remind you in this current edition, we have a story on the talented Seagraves kids. Emily and Sean Hudson Seagraves have been moving up the rankings in their age groups in tennis. We have all the details on that in the this week's paper as well. We encourage you to pick up a copy of that. Now, in next week's edition, we will have, as we we said, sports headlines. We'll have an update on the Piggott City Council meeting, other things that are going on as well. We'll also have information on a couple of activities. The Piggott Elementary School hosted a health, science, and safety fair the other evening at the elementary school gymnasium primarily. And we stopped by, and let's take a look at that now.
Taylor, if that's going to take me home, you'll be there. 30 days past September. You guys have to give the snakes a bath. Really?
And again, a great activity. It started off several years ago, rather small, and has grown each year, and a great crowd was on hand. In fact, that wasn't the biggest crowd they had that afternoon, but you can see we had a good turnout for that activity. Now, also, this past Friday, actually today, there was a career fair held at the Piggott High School, and we'll have some highlights of that coming up in next week's edition of the Clay County Times-Democrat Weekly Web Update. Also, next week's edition, we would like to encourage you to pick up the print edition only. You'll find the 2014 Northeast Arkansas Farming section, special section we do every year dedicated to the agricultural industry in Northeast Arkansas. And we have a more complete story on the Pico food story, some of the impact it's going to have on producers, some of the numbers will be crunched, give you a better idea. And that, again, why we're out here in front of the chicken house, because many years ago these were all over Clay County, and they generated thousands upon thousands of eggs and young meat chickens and so forth every day out of these hills for many years. And with the movement of Pico Foods into the region, there could be a move back in that direction. At least it's going to be good news for our producers. And again, we've got an updated story on that coming up in the Farm Tab in the next edition of the Clay County Times-Democrat. Well, with that, we wrap up another edition of the Clay County Times-Democrat Weekly Web Update. We're brought to you here on cctimesdemocrat.com each week by the good folks of Piggott State Bank. And until next time, I'm Tim Blair reporting.